Hey there, friends. Welcome back to As a Man Thinketh on Yanasa TV. So today I want to talk about something that I found deeply disturbing. This is disturbing because the people that I'm talking about here are people who are working as university professors, educating our future youth. And for whatever reason, this is supposed to be a professor of bioethics. And what I'm about to share with you guys is deeply disturbing when it comes to anybody trying to teach anyone about ethics. There's this new bioethics paper that's been released by Parker Crutchfield, who is a professor at Western Michigan University, a professor of ethics. His paper is titled Beneficial Blood Sucking, and it's ethically poisonous. He tries to make the argument that alpha-gal syndrome, which is a dangerous meat allergy that comes from the bite of a Lone Star tick, may be some sort of moral bioenhancer and that we should embrace it. This is what he says in his paper. If eating meat is morally impermissible, then efforts to prevent the spread of tick-borne illness AGS are also morally impermissible. Tick-borne AGS is a moral bioenhancer if and when it motivates people to stop eating meat. This guy goes on to explain what he calls the convergence argument. He uses these big words, and this is what I'm saying. These people are educating our youth, our young, and this is the type of things that they're educating them on. If Xing prevents the world from becoming a significantly worse place, doesn't violate anyone's rights, and promotes virtuous action or character, then Xing is strongly pro tanto obligatory. Promoting tick-borne AGS satisfies each of these conditions. Therefore, promoting tick-borne AGS is strongly pro tanto obligatory. Pro tanto, however you want to say it. So let's just be clear here. This is an argument for altering people's biology without their consent, on the premise that it's good for their own good, because apparently it's wrong for people to eat red meat. And in this paper, he'll go into all the different reasons why it's wrong to eat red meat, including, of course, the climate and saving the world. So let me talk a little bit about alpha-gal syndrome for those of you who don't know a whole lot about it real quick. Alpha-gal syndrome is an immune sensitization, not a genetic alteration. Tick saliva introduces algal molecules, triggering an IgE-medicated allergic response to mammalian meat. The effect is long-lasting, life-changing, but it doesn't alter your DNA. Still, the AGS example sets a dangerous precedent. If a naturally occurring allergy can be, or, I would argue it's not natural, but that's a whole other conversation. I have a video on this you can watch. If it can be framed as morally desirable, then deliberate engineering to replicate or expand its effects becomes easier to justify. Now, here's another interesting point of this that I think is important in understanding Crutchfield, because Crutchfield has written numerous papers that have appeared in bioethics journals. And that is that he doesn't just believe that we should be promoting AGS and these dangerous tick bites and trying to get more people infected with alpha-gal syndrome to save the world, but he also believes that it should be done so covertly and not overtly. If moral bioenhancement ought to be compulsory, then its administration ought to be covert rather than overt. I argue that the covert administration of a compulsory moral bioenhancement program better conforms to public health ethics than does an overt compulsory system. In particular, covert compulsory program promotes values such as liberty, utility, equality, and autonomy better than an overt program does. He makes this proposal explicit. Now, this is a separate paper that he had written earlier, but he makes these similar arguments in his recent research paper. Some theorists argue that moral bioenhancement ought to be compulsory. I take this argument one step further, without the recipients knowing that they are receiving the enhancement. The implications here are chilling. Your biology could be altered for moral ends without your consent or knowledge. And secrecy of the changes to your biology would be considered a virtue because they're saving the world from meat eaters. So I think Crutchfield is making a category mistake here by framing this as some sort of public health issue, and that we should treat it the same way that we do quarantine and vaccines, as making it mandatory, and then taking it a step further and saying, but we don't want people to even realize it's happening to them, it's just going to happen to them, and that's that. Personally, when I look at articles like this and then reflect on things like vaccines and other things that we've faced recently in history, it makes you kind of come to the realization that these are the types of models that are being taught in the classroom to college students. This is what is modeling their thought going forward. People kind of brainwashing them into thinking that humans can't take care of themselves. We, as the virtuous ones, need to come out with programs that would change their biometrics without them even realizing it, so that we can do better by them and better by society and better by the climate altogether. Regardless of the fact that there are plenty of scientific arguments that go against everything that this guy believes, what he is trying to say is virtuous and should be done against our own will is supported by what he believes, not necessarily what other scientists have come up with, what other scientists understand. And there's actually some pretty intricate conversations when I dug into this guy and I dug into this whole concept, because, you know, when we talk about alpha-gal syndrome, I did a video on this earlier this year. There are questions around Lyme disease, certain diseases that come from ticks, where did they come from? And there's a lot of potential evidence that says, you know, they were created in a lab, that they weren't really created by nature. And you know, that is concerning. You know, why should we be testing this stuff? And the people who are creating it, what are their moral values? What are their virtues? And even though there's no evidence of anything ever being covertly done to human beings, because it was covert, we wouldn't know about it, the question still arises often, you know, is this even a conversation with an authority? But it is. It's happening with university professors. They're publishing these papers in scientific journals, scientific ethic journals. It's absolutely unbelievable. It's unbelievable to me that people would actually say this stuff out loud, which, you know, when people talk about, well, you know, the thought of it being a bioweapon is a conspiracy theory, not really, because it's not that they're saying this is a weapon. Remember, this is something that would be a moral bioenhancement, make us more moral, those evil meat eaters. Now, there are historical parallels to this type of conversation, and that's why I think when we hear these things, when we read these reports, we need to call it out and we need to have the conversation out loud and say, no, we're not okay with this. Crutchfield's work is, you know, purely philosophical. I'm just throwing these ideas out at students at a university, the future of society. But throughout history, we've seen a lot of academic what-ifs, and they have often, believe it or not, laid the groundwork for coercive policy. Eugenics, for example, started as a scholarly theory before it actually became law. Public health rhetoric has been used to justify forced sterilization of individuals. It's been used to force vaccination of individuals. Vaccination that, you know, according to RFK Jr. was actually more dangerous.
Hi, it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. here, your HHS secretary. At HHS, we have a division called the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, or BARDA. BARDA drives some of our most advanced scientific research. It funds developments of vaccines, drugs, diagnostics, and other tools to fight emerging diseases and national health threats. Over the past few weeks, BARDA reviewed 22 mRNA vaccine development investments and began canceling them. Let me explain why. Most of these shots are for flu or COVID, but as the pandemic showed us, mRNA vaccines don't perform well against viruses that infect the upper respiratory tract. Here's the problem. mRNA only codes for a small part of the viral proteins, usually a single antigen. One mutation and the vaccine becomes ineffective. This dynamic drives a phenomenon called antigenic shift, meaning that the vaccine paradoxically encourages new mutations and can actually prolong pandemics as the virus constantly mutates to escape the protective effects of the vaccine. Millions of people, maybe even you or someone you know, caught the Omicron variant despite being vaccinated. That's because a single mutation can make mRNA vaccines ineffective. The same risk applies to flu. After reviewing the science and consulting top experts at NIH and FDA, HHS has determined that mRNA technology poses more risks than benefits for these respiratory viruses. That's why, after extensive review, BARDA has begun the process of terminating these 22 contracts totaling just under $500 million.
So these ethical arguments are more dangerous than we think that they are, and especially when they're published in these scientific magazines, and when these are the philosophical teachings of professors at universities. I'm sorry, but there is nothing ethical. There's absolutely nothing ethical about saying we should change somebody's biometrics without them knowing about it because it's the virtuous thing to do. It's not, their argument isn't even fully supported by science that eating meat is bad. I mean, they're going to try and make the argument that it's bad for you, it's bad for the environment, but there are a lot of arguments that go against all of those arguments. It's a topic of discussion. It's not a proven thing. So even suggesting that this is ethical and virtuous is wrong. These are people who think of you and I as instruments. And what's morally wrong to them, or so I a lot of times I question, what is morally correct, because I feel like morals depend on who holds the power, right? Whoever's in power to say this is moral or not moral, it's their morals and their virtues that, the rest of us are stuck dealing with. And that's kind of where, these people come from when they're coming from this pedestal that says, this is wrong, we need to stop people from doing it, even if we have to do it covertly so they don't even realize it's happening to them. But then again, we have to question the origins of alpha-gal, of things like Lyme disease. I mean, as people, as human beings, we cannot go when we read stuff like this without questioning the actual origins, because he's not alone in this thought process. I can tell you that right now. If you've lived through, 2019 into 2022, you know that he's not alone in this thought process. It's hard to believe, but we've actually seen in our lifetime engineered ticks, engineered mosquitoes, these bugs that have been engineered to carry things. We're actually right now, we're engineering flies to try and stop the flesh-eating flies that are coming across the Mexico-Texas border. Anyway, guys, this was just a quick video because it is a question, like I said, that I have come up with in the past around this particular situation. And when I read this article, it really kind of, it was unsettling to me. It was unsettling because these are, like I said, these are people who are teaching our youth, who are teaching those who are coming up through college, going into professions around the world, who are going to be our future policymakers. And what they're teaching them is that it is ethically correct to, in some sort of way, modify people's biology if it fits their morals, because that's the most virtuous thing that they could possibly do. And they should do it covertly, nonetheless, covertly, so nobody will ever know what's going on. This is the same thing that we've seen with our food system, the foods that we eat, the things that we eat that have been making a lot of people sick. We're starting to wake up to it now, and it's built a lot of distrust. I think this thought process in and of itself, and then publishing it, like being brazen enough to publish it, is the type of thing that has gotten a lot of people thinking over the last several years, going, was this intentional? Was this done on purpose to us? Are people messing with our biometrics? It's clear that the thought process is out there. How far does it go? I'll tell you what I think. I think that just simply philosophical or not, this article was deranged. It was sick. Curious to know what you guys think down below. Anyway, guys, I apologize. I've been working a lot with some other things, but I will have some more stories out for you this week here on UNASA TV, so stay tuned. Every day, more and more Americans are waking up to the fact that our society is simply unhealthy. We've been being fed poisons and being told to put poisons on our body by corporate America for years. A lot of the things that we've been told were bad for us, like animal fats, are actually good for our bodies. Your skin is the largest organ of your body, which is why on UNASA Trade & Co., we're pleased to offer you guys bison tallow lotions and creams. These bison tallow lotions and creams are amazing. They're not made by a big corporation. They're made by a homesteader, just like you guys, our friends out of Canada, Dr. Nathaniel and Susan Ostashowski. We've visited numerous bison ranches and farms and parks across the entire continent of North America. And these are some really great people who have come up with some really great products. And you can buy them on Unasa Trading Co. and support this program and support your health all at the same time.